My computer sometimes is a little strange. So it is working now. The record just started. Okay. I'll recap a little bit of last week's shiur. We're discussing the concept of precious, and we spoke about 3 different areas of where precious becomes applicable. Areas of precious were hana'ah, when it comes to physical benefit, when it comes to halacha, right, sometimes being machmir, and when it comes to the way we interact with people, and sometimes trying to avoid certain social gatherings, social situations, in order to make sure that we're kind of, sometimes it's removed from sin, and sometimes it's to be able to just focus on what's important, right? Right, the Gedolei Hador don't typically binge watch Netflix, right? Not necessarily. I mean, there is a lot of bad stuff on it, but not necessarily because it's bad per se, but just like, why would you waste your time on that? So social interactions, like schmoozing and hanging out with tons of people all the time, is not necessarily the most advantageous to freeing up one's time to learn Torah. So we continue off that in Perek Tevav. Hine aderech hamuvchar leknos es haprishus, hu she'istakal adam b'griut tanugot ha'olam hazeh u'pchitusa mitzad atma. So we're now going to be talking about, now that we know maybe what a person should do, and the fact that a person should be porish, so I guess psychologically, mentally, how could a person get there? It's one thing to know what to do; it's another thing to be able to do it. So it says the first thing is to recognize how low, like the lowliness is here the word uses, but like how debased and how low physical pleasure is. Right? If you view physical pleasure as something that's amazing and that's a milo and that's something we strive for, then being porish is impossible. In order to be porish, you have to recognize why you want to be porish from something and recognize something that's a reason that a benefit from why to do that, and to recognize a bad quality within that thing that you want to be porish from. So the fact that they themselves, the physical pleasures, are lowly, and that bad things, tremendously bad things, could result and offshoot from delving into those physical pleasures. Obviously, feel free to always speak questions or comments if you have throughout this year. Hupitui hainayim v'anavatim b'mara hadvarim sher huto ve'arev l'chora. That a person is, we have a natural tendency, right? There's certain, like a person is called an adam, right? I think we discussed this once in the past, that, right? Because we're from, right? I mean, we're made, literally, Adam Rishon was made from the ground. Hashem got the dirt from all around the earth, as Rashi explains. And because of that, we have a certain lowliness to us. I think when we discussed it, it was actually talking about laziness. But I don't want to speak about laziness now, but a connection to the physical world, right? We are physical people. And when a person views the pleasure as a good thing, meaning we naturally are drawn towards recognizing and wanting pleasure, let's say. And therefore, a person needs a lot of strategies in order to be able to try to distance yourselves from the way it says pito einayim, from like the desire in one's eyes, right? The fact that this looks really good. He's going to be discussing the first specific example he discusses is food. Obviously, there could be a million different examples. I'm sure everyone, when you're hearing this, you're thinking about something, and it might be different for each and every one of us, right? There are plenty of typos to go around. So he says that a person shouldn't be seduced by the superficiality of the physical desire, of the thing that looks really appealing, but like he's saying, you have to recognize like that it's fake almost. And he's going to discuss that, or that's not. It's certainly kol yama lo pligi. That's certainly not as great as you think it's going to be. It says this is what caused the first sin of Adam and Chava. As it's testified in Bereshis, it's written that Chava saw that the tree looked good, right? And she had a desire for it in her eyes. And she took from the tree and she ate. All of it comes from the fact of how it appears to us. I'll share with you an amazing Dvar Torah I heard. I heard this from there's a rabbi from YCQ. In YCQ, there's a shul. There's a rabbi of the shul I heard somewhere around 5-6 years ago, maybe more actually. I don't know. Probably actually like 9-10 years ago. When I was in YU still in the Smicha, I think. So listen to this. The Gemara, I believe in Sukkah, discusses that when Mashiach comes, so the Yetzer Hara is going to be slaughtered in front of everyone. Gemara says that to the wicked people, it's going to appear like a piece of hair. And to the tzaddikim, it's going to appear like a mountain. And both of them are going to be crying. Both the tzaddikim and the Risham are going to be crying. The Risham are going to be crying because they say, look at this small Yetzer Hara, small piece of hair. How could I not have conquered that? I gave in to my sins over and over again. I never could it could have been so easy to just overcome it. And to the tzaddikim, it's going to appear like a huge mountain. And they're going to say, wow, look how much we've conquered in our lives, right? We continuously defeat the Yetzer Hara, and it was this huge mountain. Right, as the line in the Gemara says, "Kol gadol himenu." That's the last line. The end of the line is Yitro gadol himenu. The line is the greater the person, the greater the Yetzer Hara. I apologize, I'm forgetting the ratio. I'm forgetting the first half of the line, but it has to do with the fact that the more a person grows, the more Yetzer Hara like works harder to get them to fail. And here the tzaddikim overcame this huge mountain. So he asked the following question. He says, why does it appear like a mountain? In the Yetzer Hara to eat a cheeseburger. I just heard I was driving on my way to Marif and heard a commercial on the radio that McDonald's is going to be offering, I forgot what specific free items, but free items, at least one item each day for teachers to show appreciation. So I'm a teacher. So I'm thinking like, oh man, now I don't really have an actual Yetzer Hara or Hashem to go into McDonald's, but like free food every day, seems to be pretty tempting. But back to the question at hand. So why does it appear like a mountain? How come the Yetzer Hara, is it really that big, the Yetzer Hara? He answered as follows. He said that the MS and the way things work with sin is that we always imagine that the sin is going to be better than it actually is. So person has a desire. You watch a commercial for McDonald's or Domino's Pizza, and like oh my God, I wish I could have that. It just looks so good. Pepperoni pizza, I wish I could try that. I don't even know what it tastes like. Bacon, great, right? So the Yetzer Hara is this huge mountain. Like there's so much what's called dimyon, so much of our just imagination for the sin that it's huge, and it becomes more difficult to overcome. But when someone actually sins, like I remember, let's say, I was pretty young, but I remember when Oreos and Chips Ahoy became kosher on the same day. And I remember trying like Chips Ahoy, and I'm like, okay, Oreos are really good, but it's like, okay, like it's a cookie, right? When something's not kosher, when you can have it, it seems like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. Like I wish I could have it, but I can't. And it's this huge taiva to overcome sometimes. But when something is permissible, and then you have it, and you're like, okay, it's fine. So why the mountain? Why is the Yetzer Hara pure like a mountain? Because they always, a tzaddik who never violated it, always lived in that dimyon. He always had to overcome the Yetzer Hara, not in its reality of, oh, this really isn't so amazing. I know what this tastes like. But in the dimyon of, wow, this looks so, so good. And it becomes so much more difficult to overcome. And yet they were still able to overcome the Yetzer Hara. So he says, so that's like when it comes to the sin of Adam Rishon and Adam and Chava, the fruit, that's why I bring it up now, because the fruit just appeared, it was so desirable in her eyes. Not because the fruit necessarily tasted so good per se, but because she couldn't have it, it makes it more desirable. That's the chiddush here. Aval ksheisbar el Adam yos hatov hahu kozev legamre midome bli shom smada nachona. That when a person is able to recognize that this is false, this pleasure, this is what is this? Like what am I giving into? Right? The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, in order to think about, to help yourself think about not sinning, when it comes to, let's say, areas of arayos, of women, says, picture the fact that they're literally like going to turn into maggots when they die. Like the flesh is going to decompose and it's nothing. So that's what it says. Like, I mean, look at its value. Look really what it is. So recognize the falsehood within the desire. And the potential, the evil that could result from it, or near evil that could result from it. Certainly, if a person is able to recognize that this is false, this is bad, I should not do this, and I know that this is not going to give me any real pleasure. I know this is fake. I know it might give me a fleeting moment of pleasure, and then I'm going to feel terrible about it. When a person's able to be objective, you're going to be repulsed by it. That a person needs to train his mind. You need to be like, right, there's certain times where we think with our emotions, certain times we think with our cognition, right? So you wanna be able to think rationally about it. You want to be able to train your mind to recognize the falsehoods within it, within this thing. And the fact that if you're able to do that, you're going to be repulsed by it. So much so where then you shouldn't even have to think about it. You shouldn't have to rationalize it, right? You're not even going to want to look at it. It's not going to be tough for you to overcome it. Says Hine Tanu Kamachal. Now, like I told you, the specific example he's going to start with is that of food. He's actually going to be discussing something that I heard 15 years ago or so from my Rabbi, who gives Musar on Thursday night in Yeshiva and in Reshit. And when it comes to the type of food, I remember he literally stuck out his tongue and he said, the pleasure of food goes from here to here. And it says from like the front of your tongue to the back of your tongue. That's food. That's the pleasure, right? The steak looks so good. Oh my God, the ribs. What is it? It's pleasure for a few moments. That's what he's going to be discussing. And that's an example of objectifying and recognizing the falsehood of taiva, right? I think about it at times, like you guys all, I believe, I don't know, I don't think Jacob's in Houston. Let's assume we're all in Teaneck. You all live within 2 blocks of restaurants. Now, to go to restaurants, spend a lot of money on food, which I certainly have done and continue to do. But like, I recognize like it is a little strange, right? You could just eat something else for much cheaper and it fills you up and gives you the nourishment that you need, if not even might be even more healthy. But the thing, and there are people that travel for food, right? Sometimes people will travel an hour to go to a restaurant, or could be even more. Some people might go on vacations in order to go to restaurants. That's pretty much what people do on vacation all the time anyway. So he says, food is something where the pleasure is extremely tangible, right? You literally feel the food on you. But there's nothing in the world that's really more kind of like more fake or more like it goes away so quickly. The amount of time, it's something that certainly passes. Says because the whole pleasure of it is just in your throat, just in your mouth. Because then it goes into your stomach. And it's forgotten as if you never had it. Right? You eat something, it might taste good for a few seconds, but then it's gone. And that's it until you have your next bite. Right? Avusim, that a person that he says you might be, this is the delicacy back then, I guess, fattened swans. Okay, can't make this stuff up, right? So a person is able to be full from fattened swans, just as much as a person could get full from having some coarse bread, right? So imagine you could have plain piece of bread, or you could have a steak. And happens to be, this is not a great time for me to learn about this because I did have steak for dinner tonight. But either way, I only prepared after I had dinner tonight. Also, my wife went shopping. My wife made the dinner, but either way, those are my excuses. But I certainly recognize this as MS nonetheless. So a person could have a steak, they could have a piece of bread, and they're going to end up with the same result of being full and hopefully having energy to do what you need. Nonetheless, right, food could actually damage you, right? I certainly know it was obesity, probably still is, the number one cause of death in America has been due to obesity, meaning that means everything within obesity, heart disease, right? Things like that. That so many diseases and illnesses that come about through eating. And he says, and minimally, even if you're not going to get sick from it, says sometimes you just feel heavy afterwards, right? That heaviness from eating, certainly from overeating, but not even overeating per se. Sometimes certain foods, right, give you heartburn, right, some lethargy, whatever it may be. But like, imagine there's a few moments of pleasure, and it could physically make you sick, and it could certainly make you tired and feel weak, right? And then he discusses like the vapors like in your body, right? Darken your intellect, okay? Maybe right, sometimes you're not gonna be able to think as straight based on what you're eating. Certainly, a person shouldn't run after this. Since what you think is good isn't really good. Actually, let me see the definition here. Yeah, since it's good is not truly good, while it's evil is truly evil. And you have to recognize this. It's also wild to like imagine Ramchal live nowadays. I don't know. I'm like curious to Google it, which I'm not going to do right now. But when it comes to restaurants, the restaurant industry is not so old. I don't believe restaurants were around for thousands of years. Even if they were around for the last few hundred years, which I don't believe they were, but even if they were, certainly it's not to the extent that it's nowadays of each restaurant chain of $1 billion industries. So I can imagine what he would say. Just people like that. And sometimes our lives revolve around food. Continues. It says this example that I applied to food applies to all other hana, all other physical benefit. That if you look at it, that even the thing that seems good, even that thing is only for a small amount of time. And the bad that's going to come out from it, that's going to result, in the case of food, it was illness and feeling heavy. That's going to last a much longer time than the physical pleasure that you get for the food. That a person, or a thinking person, a rational person, would never put themselves in this take this risk of when you come to really to weigh things. And he says this is obvious. This is clear. Yasmin be and a person is able to really think deeply and go through everything carefully and recognize the truth. You're going to be able slowly but surely to break from these shackles. That you're no longer going to be deceived by the physical pleasure that tries to get you to sin. Right? Our minds tell us to go after this. The heart tells us to run after this, how great it's going to be. So if we're able to really be objective and think it through properly, we're slowly but surely we're going to be able to get out of this. Until we get to a point where we're actually repulsed by this. Then a person will come to a point of living their life of only enjoying and using things out of necessity. Just as I had written, right? All of Precious is about, it's not necessarily about removing pleasure. I think that would be an inaccurate definition of Precious. But Precious is about removing unnecessary pleasure, right? Have pleasure is fine, right? That's where we saw the Gemaras that were kind of when we started with Precious, we had that contradiction of certain Maimari Chazal that were saying a person should be porish. But then we had many Maimari Chazal that says it's terrible if you don't get pleasure from the world Hashem gave you. What do you mean? You should be porish. Like, no, you should get pleasure for the things that you need. And you should enjoy those things that you need. But when it's beyond necessity, then you should be porish. We'll learn this next paragraph. I'll stop at Yehine. When a person comes to reflect upon this and think about this, Hadavar Gorim Kanisa HaPrecious, then you're going to be able to be Kona, this midah of Precious. Kach Sechluso Mafsid Oso, Asmada Ben Hasarim Anshe Agdolos Haros Bemachar Kavod Mar Bemahavel. That just as by thinking about this, you're able to acquire Precious, ignoring it is going to cause the opposite. Right? So ignoring is going to cause you to desire physical things. And here he discusses specifically desire, honor. That's a type of taiva. It doesn't have to be, he gave the example of food because it's tangible. There are, of course, many taivas. Kavod is a big taiva. Which he's saying it's emptiness. That a person, that he says that when a person doesn't think rationally about Precious and doesn't think about what the pleasure is, then it's impossible to not desire kavod, to recognize, to think. It's impossible to not think that kavod is so great. You're going to think that, wow, I need the kavod. Look how great it is. It's going to be impossible to not run after it, to not have a desire for it. And he says, listen to this. It's amazing. Even if a person is able to fight the Yitzhar, I'm gonna fight it. I'm not gonna go for the kavod. I'm not gonna go for this. Nonetheless, he's still gonna have a continuous war. He's gonna be have to fight continuously. Meaning, if a person, so he's saying, a person who doesn't recognize that taiva is false, but you're still like a really firm Jew, so you're going to continuously fight the taiva. You don't think it's necessarily so bad, but you're going to fight it because you know you shouldn't. Then hine hu b'sakana. That's a dangerous place to be in. Inyan ze amar Shlomo, and that's which Shlomo said in Koheles 9 days. Tov l'alechas el beis avel, melechet el beis mishtah. It's better to go to a shiva house than to go to a party, right? When we go to shiva houses, when we go to funerals, we are punched in the face with reality. I myself have almost every time I go to a shiva house or a funeral, you kind of think about if even for a few moments or more than just a few moments, about what's important in life, what matters. You hear them talking about the person who passed away, whether it's a hesped at a funeral or someone speaking about them at the Shiva house, and makes you realize like what's important in life, and what's just vanity, and what's something that's totally a person should just steer away from, because it's just really not that important. Okay, so Chavra, we will